Okay, well, good morning, 7th grade. I hope you all are doing well. Today we are on 11.5, and this is on multiplication. Now, it's obviously a little bit harder than original multiplication because we're going to be doing multiplication with positives and negatives. But we're on page 496. You want to turn there? It's a very straightforward lesson. Actually, easier than adding and subtracting negatives is multiplying and dividing, which will be our next two lessons. So that should not be very hard. Okay? Now, we all know, so if you look at the example, right, you got 3 times 3, that's 9, right? That's easy to do. Well, a very simple reality is if we have negative 3 times positive 3, that's going to equal negative 9. And if we have negative 3 times negative 3, that is going to equal, again, positive 9, okay? So for some of you, that may be the only instruction you need. When there are two negatives, it becomes a positive. When there's only one negative, it stays. When there are no negatives, it's still a positive. Okay, so for some of you, that may be the only lesson really that you need. If there's at least one negative, it's a negative. If there's no negatives, it's positive. And if there's two negatives, it's also positive. So for example, if we have negative 4 times 6, that equals negative 24. Why? Because there was only one negative. Okay, so I'm going to write this out. One negative is always negative. Okay, when you're multiplying and you have one negative, you always will have another negative. Okay, and then, amazing part here, if we had negative 4 times negative 6, that would be plus 24, which tells us that two negatives become a positive. So whenever we have two negatives, even though they're both negative, it actually changes and they both become plus. Okay, that's always, always, always true. So one negative, we only have one negative, always negative. We have two negatives, always positive. Okay, so let's do another example of this kind. Like what if we had negative 9 here times positive 8? Well, that would be, there's one negative, so it would be negative 72. If I had 8 times negative 7, what would that be? That would be negative 56. Why? Because there's one negative. So that makes the overall answer negative. The multiplication is the same, right? You only multiply the numbers just like you would normally. 9 times 8 is 72. 8 times 7, 56. Okay? So let's do a few more. What happens, though, when we just have a bunch of negatives, right? When we have negative 2 times negative 10. Well, now we have two negatives. 1, 2. So that's going to come back, and it's going to be a positive. I don't have to write the plus sign. The answer is simply 20. It is a positive 20. Why? Because when we have two negatives, they become positive. Just a rule, okay? Yeah, if you learn that rule, you're good to go. Okay, so it doesn't really get much harder than this on this lesson. I would say the only place where it gets harder is when you have multiple in the same one. So let's say we had something like this. 3 times negative 2 times negative 4. Okay, now how many, it doesn't matter that I have three things, 1, 2, 3 multiplied together. I still count the number of signs. So how many negatives do I have? 1, 2. And 2 means that the answer is going to be positive. So I know it's going to be positive, and I do 3 times 2, which is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. So my answer is 24. Okay, there's one example. Let's do another one that gets a little harder like this. Let's do this one. Negative 5 times negative 1 times negative 7, not 17, times negative 7. Okay, now here I look. How many negative signs do I have? I have 1, 2, 3. Okay, now this is where our other and our final rule comes in. Odd number of signs equals negative. Okay? It's an odd number. There's 3. So what would happen when I multiplied negative 5 times negative 1? Let's say I just did that one first. I'm going to get an answer of what? I'm going to get positive 5. But then I'm going to have to multiply it by this -7. So it's going to be 5 times -7, which you can just do it that way, which is going to be -35. But you see how the answer was negative here. Why? Because it had an odd number of signs. 1, 2, 3, and 3 is an odd number, so therefore it's going to be -35. So I still multiply them. So I can either count the signs and do the odd thing, or you can just do one step at a time like I did here. +5 times -7, then you automatically know, yep, it's going to be -35. Okay, let's do another one like that, because I think it's helpful. Let's do 6 times 2 times -5. Okay, now in this one, there's one sign, so that's easy, right? There's one negative, so I know the final answer has to be negative. So 6 times 2 is 12, and then 12 times the -5 here is going to be -60. Okay, and there's my final answer. Now, the only place that this gets a little harder in your homework is that they have you do multiple steps at once. So let's look at this one. They have -5 times 2 in parentheses plus -3 times -4 in parentheses. Now, again, all we do is order of operations. We do parentheses first. So I do what's in this parentheses. What is -5 times 2? Well, I got one negative sign, so I know this answer is going to be negative. And what's 5 times 2? 10. Plus, what's -3 times -4? They're 2. Okay, 1, 2. So it's going to be a positive. So it's going to be plus a positive 12. Okay, which that looks a little confusing, right? We got an extra plus sign, so I can just erase that and just put plus 12. Now I go back to my other rule, right, which is 1 is negative, 1 is positive. So what do I always do? You should know by now. I always subtract 12 minus 10, which is 2. And I say, which number is bigger? Is 12 or 10 bigger? 12 is bigger. 12 has the positive, so the answer then is positive 2. Okay, I'm going to do one more like that, and then we will jump into the homework. So here's another example. 10. This actually may be one of your homework ones, so I'd write it down. 10 minus -7 times -2. Okay, now the key part here, order of operations, what does it say? It says we always do multiplication first. So what is -7? There's one negative sign, and there's two negative signs. -7 times -2, which becomes plus 14. But look what I have. 10 minus a plus 14. Now, at this stage, if you follow what I would say, this plus and the minus, what do they always become? One big minus sign. So we get 10 minus 14. Now, again, we have one positive right here, this plus 10, and one negative. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do 14 minus 10, and we get 4. And then I say, which one has the bigger sign? The 14 has the bigger sign, and it is a negative, so it's going to be a -4. So what does my answer translate to overall? -4. Okay, so that's kind of combining some steps. Got to remember, order of operations, right, is parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, addition, and subtraction. So, PEMDAS. Got to remember PEMDAS, okay? So that's part of our homework. But remember, just to go back to the beginning, simply, all it works is something like this. If we have -7 times 5, we're going to get -35. Why? Because there's one negative sign. 7 times 5, right, that's easy, 35. And if it's -7 times -5, those cancel out and becomes positive 35 again, okay? So here's our homework. We are on page 497, and this is 11.5. We're doing 2 through 38 even, okay? So that's all you got for this wonderful Tuesday. I hope that you are enjoying quarantine. We got less than 2 weeks left, and this is our last unit. Chapter 11 is our last one. So with that, God bless. Miss Rach is over and out.